as a community to say no more.
That we're here with solidarity, that we're here, we're peaceful, but we are aggressive. We are aggressive.
Yes, I'm the mayor, but I'm a black woman first.
This anger has been building up for the past 50 years. We're just mad that there's no hope. We want hope.
This moment could be a transformative moment for America. It could be a time where we really fundamentally change some things. We can't just think that the protest is enough.
I want to start by saying thank you for being a part of this discussion. Race in America, the conversation. You know, I'm sure watching those images, really a hard dose of reality for many of us, probably disbelief for some, and many of you wondering what's going to happen next. Take a look at this, that image there. George Floyd on the ground, a knee to his neck from an officer. You know, many people are wondering how we got to this climate right now. It really is part of a conversation that many people have been yearning to have. It is a conversation that many people have been trying to avoid. But it is a conversation we are having tonight. It's a conversation that we're going to break down that wall, be raw with you, and really open the door to start that conversation. A lot of the people you see right here behind us, they all want to know. They all want to have that conversation. Good evening. I'm Marcus Washington.
And I'm Jessica Aguirre. Over the next hour, we're going to open the door to that sometimes very difficult conversation surrounding race and injustice, not just at the hands of police, but also laws that have led to many inequities. We're going to be talking about race relations. It is complex, it is uncomfortable, and it is emotional, but we're going to do it tonight. And we're going to do it with vulnerability and with respect. Okay, here's where we are. With a moment so powerful, it has spanned across all 50 states of this country, from New York to Washington, D.C., to Chicago and Los Angeles. Millions of protesters hit the streets to have their voices heard. And it's not just in America. We've seen demonstrations in London, Paris, Amsterdam, and South Africa. George Floyd's death has both galvanized us and highlighted our deepest divisions. Let's take you outside right now. Protests continue right now. Live look from Mountain View. This was organized by Los Altos and Mountain View students.
So a lot of people are probably asking, how did we get here? How did we get to this point where thousands of people right here in the Bay Area and millions across the world marching as one? Now, we can't deny there's centuries of pain and suffering, decades of injustice, and now hundreds of years of anger boiling over into this watershed moment. They call this nation the Great Melting Pot. But history has shown that for those fighting for equal rights, the melting pot has long been boiling over. The road to the outcry over the killing of George Floyd is paved with the blood of many others.
Can we all get along?
In 1992, it was sparked by the acquittal of 4 Los Angeles police officers accused of using excessive force to arrest Rodney King. 2009, it was the fatal shooting of Oscar Grant in Oakland by a BART police officer. 2015, the anger sparked when a white South Carolina police officer fatally shot Walter Scott in the back. This is after stopping him for a broken brake light.
I don't understand.
And in the months leading up to George Floyd's death, there was 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, a black man chased and fatally shot while jogging by 2 white men in Georgia.
He just didn't deserve to go out like that.
Did somebody kick in the door inside my girlfriend?
Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old EMT in Louisville, Kentucky, killed in a hail of bullets as police mistakenly raided her home.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
And just days before Floyd's death, the outcry came as a woman called 911 on Christian Cooper, a black man birdwatching in Central Park.
You know, black men are shot, gunned down because of the presumptions that people make.
On May 25th in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 46-year-old George Floyd died after a police officer pressed his knee to his neck face down in the street for 9 minutes. As Floyd repeatedly said, "I can't breathe. It would take only a short time before the name George Floyd would tip that great melting pot on its side. You know, very heavy is kind of how I look at that. Because, you know, when you think about it, when we see those images, we hear those names, many of those names now, my friends and I, we actually talk about it, Jessica. We talk about, we feel like we know them. Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Botham Jean. All of these names, never knew before, but now we know them. And you know, the one thing that really is hard for a lot of people is because they look like family members. For a lot of black people. You see those pictures.
Yeah.
Looks like your cousin, your brother, and some parents, your son.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so hard for a lot of people to see this and not talk about it, because that's why it's so heavy. But I want us to talk about it. I want us to open that conversation, open that door, because it is heavy, but if we talk about it, we really can move past it.
So we saw there Rodney King. I remember seeing that video for the first time in a newsroom in 1991, and then seeing the riots in South Central in 1992. And as that unfolded, I thought to myself, I will never see anything like this again in my lifetime, right?
That?
I thought this could never happen again because of the outrage. And yet it's happened so many other times. So I ask you this, as a black man, do you feel despair now? Do you feel fear? Do you feel sadness? Because we talked about this earlier.
Right.
There's just this sadness that's in the world right now because of what we've seen.
Well, you know what? There are many emotions. You know, there are days where you feel sad. It feels so heavy that you don't know if you can go on. There are days where you see the light when you see officers arrested, like in Floyd's case, where you see, okay, accountability is being had in this situation. And I think that is the part of hope. And you know what a big hope is? Throughout this past week, looking at protests across the country, across the world, you're seeing more white people.
Yeah, a lot more. Let me ask you something else. Is there ever a moment, Marcus, that you are not aware of being black when you walk around?
Never.
You never?
I never walk into a room. I never talk on the phone to someone I don't know. I'm always aware that I am a black man.
God,
and I'm aware
such a burden.
And I'm 6'4", roughly about 240 pounds. I'm a big guy, and I understand how that can be intimidating for a lot of people. And I was taught, because I've been a tall guy all my life, I was taught by my family when I was probably like 12 or 13 that you have to be careful about it. You don't want to scare people. You want to make sure you let your presence known.
As a 13-year-old, you were told you're going to scare people.
Right. And these are conversations that we're seeing people have throughout their homes across the country. And people say they don't understand why. Well, we want to open that door to why. And we want to open the door so you can see inside our house. Because I think that's the disconnect sometimes.
Connection between people is so important.
It really is.
Changes the dynamic.
It really is. You know, and you know, we're going to be joined by a lot of people today talking about a lot of these things. Leaders of the youth movement, many who have experienced decades of injustice. Among them, Bay Area Congressman Barbara Lee, San Francisco Reverend Amos Brown, and the chair of the Oakland Police Commission, Regina Jackson.
Okay, let's begin with what's been the fuel of this call for justice, the demonstrations. One of the biggest earlier this week happened in Oakland when 15,000 people marched, and the mass collection of people from all walks of life wasn't organized by a veteran civil rights leader, but by two 19-year-old college students who felt they just could not stay silent. Now, joining us now are both of those young men, Xavier Brown and Akil Riley. Guys, thanks for much for being with me at this hour. I want to start with knowing not intellectually what you wanted to do, but what you felt, what rose inside of you that made you say, we've got to get this done, and we've got to bring other people with us.
I mean, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, right. You definitely don't have to be intellectual to stand up for a cause like this. You know, really just at the root of it was pain and you know, seeing all the suffering that we go through and just saying that I can't let this. I got to be the one to say that we can't let this slide anymore.
Yeah, and I don't think that it was anything that rose in me. I think that it was something that has always been with me just as a young black man growing up. You know what I mean? Like it's this constant pain where like you know that the country you live in does not love you, and it was pretty much rooted in, you know, like I didn't want this police brutality case just to turn into another hashtag, and I didn't want it to just blow over in a few a day. So me and Akil were like, we have to take action, you know.
Xavier, when you looked in, this was, you guys organized this, and all of a sudden it was the biggest protest we saw out there. When you looked around and you saw all the faces out there, first of all, just the magnitude of seeing so many people, but the fact that there were so many people from so many walks of life, from so many different races, did that give you any sense of unity or any sense of hope?
I mean, I would say it gave me a good sense of unity and community, and I guess a little bit of hope, but I didn't really see it as hope, more as, just how anyone would feel when they try to organize and protest. I just really saw that as the beginning of a revolution that has been going on for tons of years, this is just a continuation of it, and it's just a start of it, a continuation of it in Oakland. That's all I saw it as.
Akil, you and Xavier, you're both super accomplished. You're both in great schools. So in spite of that, do you still see yourself as that you could be George Floyd any day of the week? It could happen to you at any moment. Do you live in that fear?
Yes. I mean, I don't know if I live in fear, but I know that it can happen.
Xavier? Do you feel the same?
Yeah, no, it's, I try to not live in constant fear, but I know that any time that I step out of the house, and if a police officer, just so happens to pull me over, he has the power in his hands to end my life, and I know that the odds for me, just because of the color of my skin, are very low as a result,
So Martin Luther King said a riot is the language of the unheard. Your parents, your grandparents lived those historic moments. Do you see yourself now as kind of the new civil rights leaders, given what you've been able to do in just such a short time of amassing so many people and getting people to hear your message?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we all should strive to be leaders and have a say in our own future, our own destiny, but it's a continuation, like Xavier said. We're just trying to continue the struggle, and we all should play a part in that.
Right. Yeah, no, just adding on to that, I think that all this shows is that anyone can be a leader, as long as you know what you believe in, and as long as you strive for, a better future for not only yourself, but for the people around you. Even if you're not black, if you truly want to strive for justice for, people around you, then you should. But, yeah, that's
well, we thank you both for being with us and speaking so candidly to us. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you know what? There's so many stories to be told in each of those peaceful marches. Every black man and woman probably will tell you that the problem isn't just the death of many of those people, it's the injustice that follows. Now, one of those passionate voices, KMEL DJ Big Von, he has been on the air for more than 20 years here in the Bay Area. Big Von, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man. I love the conversation that y'all giving the people. I think a lot of these things need to be heard by a lot of those that seem to be not aware of what's going on in the world. Maybe they don't go outside enough, but I'm glad y'all talking about it, and I'm glad I could be here.
Yeah, well, I want to start out with that question. I know a lot of people are talking about George Floyd, the center of what we're seeing right now. When you saw that video, when you heard about what happened, what went through your mind?
That it was wrong, and I hope that these guys get everything that's coming to them. I don't understand why he got arrested and none of that, but to have your knee on his neck that long, you wrong, and you got to go. Until you be his partner, I know you got to ride with him, but if you can ride with him, you can sit in the cell with him, because you know that's wrong. But if you spend more time talking to the people that's holding the camera instead of telling your man take the knee off his neck, then that's wrong. I know you're supposed to serve and protect, not hurt us.
Did you think charges would follow?
I would hope charges would follow.
Well, now you say you hope.
I mean, you've been living like this a long time.
Okay, we're having a little issue, but I don't know if you can hear me, Vaughn. Well, one thing I really wanted to talk to him about, Jessica, is really oh, I think we've got you back. Vaughn, can you hear me?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. You froze up just a little bit. But I want to talk to you about when you were saying I'd hoped, and what many people saw on that camera, on the video, I think for a lot of people, they were nervous that nothing would happen. Is that how you felt, and why did you feel that way, if you did?
I was nervous that nothing would happen, but I know if people spoke up, they rallied and said enough, they would get arrested. But will they be completely convicted? It's one thing to get the arrest. They think they're just making us happy, but to get the full conviction, that's what we really want. We want total justice, not just a part of it.
And I know you've seen a lot of things through your life, and when you've seen the struggle of justice when it comes to a lot of these situations, Freddie Gray, Botham Jean, Philando Castile, for you, do you ever fear that this could be you one day?
I don't fear anything. I know things could happen. I don't want to seem like I'm here talking bad about all cops, because I have a lot of friends that are cops, and I'm just saying there's idiots at every job, and you just happen to caught this one idiot on tape doing this. I don't want to blame the whole force. It may be bad, but I would like them to police themselves more. And if you're not from the area, then maybe you shouldn't be policing the area. If you're scared of those people, you shouldn't be amongst those people. Don't come here and try to protect, but you're scared of the people. And sometimes they act out, and that's what we get.
And the last thing I want to say, what does it mean for you to see so many people march and be a part of the movement?
I'm glad to see people part of the movement, but I want to see how long it's going to go. Because if you can get out there and organize, I want everybody to still get up and vote. They may not listen to you while you're in front of that building, but they have to listen to that vote. And I don't care if you do it for the president or if you do it locally, but I just need you to go out there and vote. Keep it going. Don't stop. Just because no matter what we get, if we get a full conviction, we're still not happy about it. We still have to keep going to the polls, and we have to let our voice continue to be heard. All
right, Big Vaughn there. Voting is a big part of that process and making change. Thank you so much, Big Vaughn.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're just getting started. A lot of change comes from the people in power. Up next, we talk to Bay Area Congresswoman Barbara Lee about what she thinks can be done.
I'm Chris Kimura. We're streaming tonight's conversation live on Facebook and YouTube, and that's where we invite you to join this discussion. Tonight's guests have a lot to share, and you can respond to them, even pose questions if you want. We're listening online, and we'll bring you some updates throughout tonight's special.
Welcome back. Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, TRHT, is the new legislation that would form a group of experts to confront slavery and racism in the U.S. and propose ways to move forward. Congresswoman Barbara Lee from Oakland is leading that effort. Thank you so much for being with us. Before we get to that legislation, let's begin with the pain being felt in America right now. You've been so active in the civil rights movement. You were there in the 60s. Does this feel any different to you now?
You know, thank you for giving me a chance to be with you. This feels different, but the issues are very similar. And the feeling I have, I'm angry. You know, I'm very sad over the horrific murder of Mr. Floyd and all of the other Black men and women who've been killed throughout my lifetime at the hands of police. And I have this glimmer of hope, though. And this glimmer of hope is very important to have for all of us, I think, because we see our young people out hitting the streets, protesting, really saying enough is enough. And not only do they get it as it relates to police brutality, but they also are fighting for systemic change because they understand that this is all rooted in systemic racism. And I haven't seen this broad-based coalition of young people saying enough is enough, and we're going to sustain this, and we're going to make sure that we address this at a very structural level. And so that's really very different. This is not about reforms. This is not about going back to what was normal. This is about creating a new order in this country and transforming this country at its very basic core.
Yeah, because we had really taken a step back in the last couple of years in race relations. It seemed like America was more pessimistic about that relationship. Let's talk about TRHT, Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation. How would that work, and what concrete changes do you foresee that you can bring out of that?
Well, let me give you the context first. It's very important to recognize that, over 40 countries around the world, after such horrific human rights violations, such as genocide in Rwanda, have established truth and reconciliation commissions. South Africa, Germany, other countries have done this. America has never had a truth-telling commission or a truth-telling moment where we connect the horrors of slavery, of Africans, of genocide of the Native Americans, of all of the human rights violations that have led to where we are today in terms of systemic racism. So this country doesn't, and many people we weren't taught this in our schools, that there's a direct correlation between the chains of slavery, and some have been broken, yes, because of the civil rights movement and the freedom fighters and dismantling many of the Jim Crow laws. But many of those chains are still with us, and they're manifested in systemic racism, such as the disproportionate rates of Black and brown people dying from COVID-19, such as over 50% of African Americans in low-wage, barely minimum wage jobs, such as the wealth gap, such as the discrimination in housing. And so people don't make this connection. So countries have done this around the world. So it's truth-telling time. And this is about bringing awareness and education to the public so that we can move forward and understand what racism is and then move into transformation. Some commissions around the world have been reconciliation, but we decided, and I've worked on this for over 3 years with activists and academics and others, and we decided there's nothing to reconcile in America when you look at the conditions that Black and brown people live in, and look at what's happening with our Native Americans. And so we want transformation. And so what this would do, the commission would be to make recommendations, not for tinkering around the edges in terms of policies, but really how you dismantle those institutions that have given rise to systemic racism, such as mass incarceration. How do we reform the prison system? Give us some concrete reasons and how. And by that time, we hope the country's ready politically to move to support policies at the national level, at least, and at the local level, because many people in local communities are doing this work now. And so we hope that the transformation will be based on the historical context. Because if you don't know the history, if this country has never told the truth about its history, how do you heal and how do you move forward?
Right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it, Congresswoman Lee.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Powerful words there. You know what? Demanding change. You know, we're seeing this throughout the country right now. This is a live look in Seattle. And that's what protesters around the country and right here in the Bay Area are demanding change. It's exactly what they told us when we asked them why they decided to march in solidarity.
What's going on right now is just isn't right. And there needs to be a big systematic change so that, you know, this can finally end, because it keeps happening over and over again.
Welcome back. Want to welcome you back to our conversation, Race in America, the conversation. We want to take a live look for you right now. This is in front of the White House in Washington, D.C. You can see there are many protesters lining up in front. They've been there for days. And we have seen many of these protests go for more peaceful moments and less of what we've been seeing with the chaos amongst those areas of protest. But many people coming together, standing as one, wanting to be a part of that mission, and that's to see justice for all, to take away injustice that we've seen and really make this country truly equal for so many people.
Yeah. If you are just joining us, we're here having an honest conversation about race in America, conversations. And Marcus, we've seen so much of this over the last couple of years.
We have. We have. We've seen so many situations from Baltimore to Ohio to Tennessee. We've seen these situations.
And you have been a part of these. I know you've covered some of these. So you have a unique perspective because you're going there as a journalist to cover it, but you're also going there as a black man to cover it.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's the thing we want to talk about, because when you're inside those protests, you see a lot, you hear a lot. And I want to talk about that. We're going to get to that in just a bit, but I want to talk about what we could have coming up just for you in just a bit. You know what? He was a man who firsthand knew Dr. King. He is a famous civil rights leader, activist Amos Brown. We're going to talk to him about what he thinks Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would think about the racial climate right now. We're going to talk to him when we come back in just a bit.
It has been going on for too long. Sorry. And people are just getting hurt from it. I just want everyone to be treated equally.
If you're just joining us, we're in our second half of our hour special, Race in America, the conversation. We've been talking about the racial divide in this country, the difficulties we're having right now. And this is actually not something new. We've been seeing this now since the 60s when Martin Luther King was marching. You have been part of some of these marches, both as a reporter and there as a man, feeling that. What is that like to cover that when you very well really understand what the people are talking about and the pain they feel?
You cover it with a different perspective. And I remember 2015, Baltimore, Freddie Gray, and the day of his funeral. After his funeral, that is when unrest sparked throughout the city of Baltimore, particularly in West Baltimore. And that's where you saw so many people angry, upset. Because it wasn't just about Freddie Gray, it was about the uncles, their friends, themselves. They were all a part of that. They have experienced it to some degree of that injustice.
And so many times.
Yes. So it was a generational thing. And so when you talk to them, I looked at it at a different perspective because I am a black man. And I know it's not just one person died, I'm upset, let's go tear up the city.
And it's not a one-off either.
Yeah, it's not. So I had to approach it, these are humans who are hurting. And we have to look at it like that. When people are hurting, you heard that saying, hurt people hurt people? And we have to think about pain. Pain is not one-dimensional. And you have to look at, there are layers to it.
Right.
Some people cry, some people yell, and some people act out, but we have to understand what that pain is.
And anger, if you really look at what anger is really fear, you know, and sadness that manifest in a different way.
And fear that it won't end.
Yeah.
Fear that you won't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And that can be a scary situation for a lot of people. But, you know, it was handling that situation with care, but telling the story, being honest. The pictures spoke for themselves. I didn't have to really talk about that, but I wanted to talk about the root of why we were there.
You can give that perspective.
It's kind of what this conversation is now, why we were there, why we are here at this moment. And I know for you as well, you've dealt with it with the Rodney King riots in LA. That's something that, you know, a lot of us watched.
Riots in Miami.
Yeah. It was a tough time.
Yeah, it's been a difficult time. And, you know, obviously I'll never be able to walk in your shoes because of the color of my skin, but being Hispanic, you know, there have been those moments where I've had racial slurs said to me, and you bring that to a story that you cover because you understand it better.
But you know what it is? It's having the conversation. It's being able to just ask and say, you know, Jessica, I really don't understand this, but can I ask you this question? And if you're coming out of true concern,
a place of vulnerability too, when you really want to hear.
I don't know anyone that wouldn't say, "What? Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's clear it up. Let's provide some understanding." And I think that's what I want that's what we really want this conversation about. And I know a lot of times they say if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. You've got to look back at the past to really find out where you are right now.
It's the best indicator.
Absolutely. Amos Brown, he first met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1956 at the NAACP convention in San Francisco. So he learned under Dr. King, fighting for equality. More than 60 years later, Reverend Brown continues his fight with the cause, the original sin, racism. Reverend Amos Brown joins us now live from Third Baptist Church in San Francisco. Mr. Brown, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to share with you and your audience.
Yeah, and I have to start off with you with a question that I've heard from a lot of people this week. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
It is. I want to talk.
In spite of.
In spite of, and that's what I want to talk about. Talk to me about what you've been seeing throughout our community, throughout the world right now. So many people walking for one cause, and that's together, solidarity, and justice.
I'm very pleased to see many people of all walks of life coming together. However, I'm troubled that we are late in the game of dealing with the evils of race and injustice in this country. 117 years ago, Dr. W.B. Du Bois said that the problem of the 20th century would be the color line. 76 years ago, a Swedish sociologist, Gunnar Myrdal, said that America was living a dilemma. And Dr. King put it in these terms: America is sick, and if she does not get well, this nation will be destroyed.
And speaking of Dr. King, I know you had a close relationship with Dr. King. What do you think he would say with the demonstrations that we're seeing throughout the world right now?
Don't just protest. Become engaged and practice the principles of becoming enlightened on the issue of race and injustice. Become engaged consistently. Encourage the African American community.
And I know a lot of people talk about...
And not talk about the problem.
Not talk about the problem, but do something about the problem. And I know that you have been fighting for years for equality. What would you tell the younger generation? Because the movements, from the civil rights movements to now, it's really a young person's fight. We saw that then, we're seeing it now. What do you say to those young people who are on the front lines wanting to make a difference? What would you tell them that you wish someone would have told you then?
Well, back in the 60s, we were young people engaged. However, we were not expecting this country to not accept therapy to deal with its mental sickness of race and injustice. And I would say to young people today, become informed, get organized, be strategic, and not just protest. And I would say also to San Francisco that it is time that we stop being celebrated with being a progressive liberal city. For if we are truly a liberal city, we would deal with the glaring disparities that are prevalent in the black community.
And we have to deal with them head on.
The median income for blacks, head on.
Head on.
The median income for blacks in this town is $29,000 a year.
And we know
but for whites, it's $101,000. We must also deal with the educational disparities in the school system. We must work to provide health services.
And that work comes together.
Mental and physical health.
Absolutely. That work comes together, standing together. And Reverend Brown, I want to thank you so much for giving your perspective, because you know what? We need to hear from our leaders. We need to hear those words of hope. And I thank you so much for giving those today.
Thank you. And please, pretty please, let's do something more than protest, but be productive in getting rid of this sickness of race in this nation and San Francisco. And when we do that, we will fulfill Dr. King's challenge that we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or else we're going to perish as fools.
Well said.
Strong words.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Reverend Brown.
So in that vein, what reforms need to be made to rebuild the relationship with police and minorities, and really all of us? We're going to talk to the chair of the Oakland Police Commission coming up next.
You know, many police chiefs across the Bay Area speaking out about George Floyd's death and condemning what happened, saying that change is needed. They're also addressing what's happening in their own communities. Here's what some of what they had to say this past few days. Let's take a listen.
Here, but we know working together with our city leaders, with our mayor, with our council, with our city manager, with our community groups, we will emerge from this moment stronger. I know that we will, because we have to.
You know, to see the loss of life as we've seen it of Mr. Floyd has caused an enormous and now worldwide response in terms of what people are feeling and expressing their frustrations and anger. I think many of us, including me, and I'll speak for myself, share those emotions. And we know that there's a lot of work to be done in policing in our country, and we know that reform and change is needed, and it's a very, very important topic.
We want our community to understand that we've heard their cries for community peace, and we are currently increasing our efforts to protect our community.
There's the meaningful hurt individuals who want to express their grief, their anger, their frustrations and tensions, and we stand with them for what happened in Minneapolis. That was unacceptable, and we are providing safe places and safe spaces.
So those are powerful words, but are they enough at this juncture? Joining me now is Regina Jackson, chair of the Oakland Police Commission and executive director of the East Oakland Youth Development Center. Thank you for being us. Regina, the things the commission does, among the things is you do oversight for the Oakland PD and the Community Police Review Agency that conducts investigations concurrent with internal affairs. So when you hear those police chiefs say that they don't condone the violence, that something has to change, and they are sincere, is it that the culture is so entrenched in the police department that it can't be changed, or do you think it can?
I have to believe that it can, but one of the reasons that the commission is here is because there has been a failing across the nation, and police need oversight. I mean, in Oakland, there is a race and equity problem, but Oakland is not by itself. And, you know, while we talk about the fact that James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And so people are talking, and that's great, but we need action.
Okay, so you run probably what is the most powerful commission in the country. Why doesn't every city have one like this, or is it that they're just not effective?
Well, I think that the Oakland citizens were very smart. They built Measure LL into the charter. So it can't just be changed by a mayor. It has to be changed by the people. So I'm not sure if other cities didn't think about this tactic or didn't organize around it, but I am very grateful to live in a city that has been about social justice and remedy for the 51 years that I've lived here.
So now there's talk about establishing national police use of force standard so that it would be across the board, every department. Would that make a difference?
I don't know. I mean, if there hasn't been one thus far, then sure, let's do it. But the real issue is around enforcement. You know, I am trying to understand where the urgency is for Black people. I mean, there is a clear and present danger throughout this nation for Black people. So what I want to hear about is strategies. We've studied it. We've got data. Now I want actionable steps. And that's what the commission wants. We have to change culture by aggressively and committed fashion and measuring those outcomes and seeing how we work against them.
So tell me a little bit about those cultures that you see inside police departments that you think needs to change.
So there are internal cultures. It's kind of like it's always been this way. Change is never swift, but you can't ask permission for change either. Clearly, it's been 11 years since Oscar Grant was killed. He was our George Floyd. And it should have stopped then. It should have stopped before then. But it's internal culture that really needs strong leadership to break it down. You need systematic approaches. You have to change both the informal and the formal practices and hold people accountable when when police brutality, is handled, it needs to hit their pocket. They need to lose their job. They need to be arrested. I mean, there needs to be these stair steps. For this guy to have had 17 citations in Minnesota and still have his job is ridiculous. It's reprehensible. So it can't be the good old boys network anymore.
And you say that even within police departments, that black officers that work within those departments, they face discrimination. You said many of them join to try to make a difference and then find that they're sidetracked and also, set aside within the department, feeling their own discrimination.
Look, we have our own disparities report that proved what we already knew, and that's that 40% of the black officers are treated unfairly when they're disciplined. And if the officers inside the department are treated inappropriately, how can we possibly think that citizens will be treated better?
Right.
We have got to fix the problems at home. And again, it is ridiculous to think that you can continue to be oppressive in hiring blacks, in training blacks, and putting them in positions. We certainly have seen people in leadership, but it is not the mantra. I mean, right now, what leaders should be doing is looking at their subject matter experts inside the departments and listening to them about how to fix many of these problems.
Regina Jackson, we thank you for being with us, and we thank you for your insight.
Thank you.
Well, as we talked about it from the beginning of this show, we wanted to have an open conversation with you. Chris Kimura is actually monitoring what people are saying online. We want you to share those questions that you may have so we can address those things for you right now as we're having that conversation, Chris.
Yeah, Marcus, we extended the invitation and you have responded. We have hundreds of people watching us right now live on our Facebook channel. You can also watch us live on YouTube. Here are some of the comments that we're getting. Let's start with John. John said to us that he thinks that we should think as one race, but a lot of people don't think like that. Some others here, Valerico feels that we should collectively ask forgiveness of our black community for turning away. And we have Earl N. Crawford Sr. who says, we want justice and peace. See me as yourself. Equality is justice that will bring peace. That's all we are asking for. And Joan asks a question. If I, a white woman, want to talk about this, how do I start? With an apology for my ancestors' fear and hatred? If you have an answer for Joan or you just want to express yourself, do so right now. We're online, live at Facebook and YouTube. Marcus, back to you.
All right, and I love what John said. See me as you see yourself. All right, thanks, Chris. Well, look, we've got much more ahead for you. She's already doing her part right here in our own community. We're talking about a lot of people. They're doing marches. They're protesting in many ways. But she started before the death of George Floyd. We're going to talk to her about what it means and why she decided to start Black Joy Parade. We're going to have that coming up for you next. Well, in Oakland, a new tradition, bringing people of all ages together to celebrate Black communities' influence on culture, present and future. It's called Black Joy Parade. Alicia Greenwell, the founder of Black Joy Parade, joining us now. Alicia, I want to thank you so much for giving us some time today.
You're welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I want to talk to you about when you decided to create Black Joy Parade. Talk to me about what came to mind, why you decided to do it, and why did you feel the time was then?
Well, it was 4 years ago, so it was both the same time and a very different time. I had just moved back to the Bay Area and had went to multiple protests because Trump had just been put into office. And I realized that those were the largest gatherings of our community. It was when I saw the most Black people together. And I asked, could we get together to celebrate? Because it feels like we weren't celebrating, we weren't recognizing and seeing ourselves enough. And we weren't being recognized and seen by others enough. It felt like if we could gather in positivity, maybe we could be seen enough to start preventing more protests and start preventing more of the harm that was happening to the community.
And when we see so many people right now creating protests, starting that movement, but I look at what you're doing. I look at it as a way to uplift, because so many times just in society, you feel the burden, you feel the pressure that society puts on you. And sometimes letting go in that space that you provided really does enrich, encourage, uplift a lot of people. Is that why you wanted to do it? Is that what you've seen since starting it 4 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been to Black Joy Parade, it's a place of pure joy. It's a day in which you don't feel like you have to carry all of the burdens. You don't feel like you have to think of all of the pressures and the hardships, because you're surrounded by your people. But it's a safe space, a space created just for you, just to celebrate your community and culture and for you to be seen. So yeah, I mean, if you go to it, it's all smiles, it's all happiness. But I think the challenge is that it's just one day, and although it's a movement and it's a mission, and we sort of try to continue that joy throughout, people still have to go back to their lives, their regular lives, and unfortunately they're not seen and celebrated in that way every day.
And I know a lot of people have been hearing, what can I do? How can I do something? Whether you're Black, white, a lot of people want to do something. You did something by seeing the need, and you went out and you went for it. Talk to me about, what would you say to those who are just looking to do something big or small?
Yeah, I mean, I think Black Joy Parade is a really specific thing in the journey or the system of what it means to be Black. I would encourage people to first learn, to first try to understand what it would be like if you're not Black, to walk in the shoes of a Black person, and how complicated that can be, and how expansive and complex the system is. And if you are Black, your own life. I think that when people take that time to educate themselves and go through that journey, you'll find your way into it. Starting Black Joy Parade is just one part of that, right? Having a space where people can celebrate and be seen is just one element that I felt I could contribute to, that I could offer this to people in order for them to heal and be happy and find their own joy. But I think if other people do the same, if they spend some time just trying to be insightful and trying to really educate themselves, they might find their own way into that. And maybe that is protesting, maybe that's donating, maybe that's working with kids, maybe that's mentoring. There's so many ways to be part of change, but first you have to educate yourself. First you have to invest in it the way you'd invest in anything else you want to be a part of.
Absolutely. Alicia Greenwell, she is the founder of Black Joy Parade. Now, thank you for what you've done for the community, and I just encourage you to keep pushing.
Thank you.
So much raw emotion. What are people feeling right now? Let's check back in with Chris Kimura. What are our viewers telling you, Chris?
Well, yeah, Jess, you said raw, and some of it is actually aimed at us. Muhammad blames the media and journalism, which he says have become biased in dividing the masses by portraying negativity and sides unjustly, not telling the truth. Kit Cotton asks, when will this racism stop in this country? Scarlet Petals, what do you say to someone who says they don't believe in white privilege? A couple others here, Gary Smith, who simply says, treat people the way you want to be treated. I think that's the golden rule, right? Ben Duncan says, sadly, racism will never end in this imperfect world, but we can all do our best to unite and counteract such evil. And Lisa Harris says, black people are not responsible for racism. We have been recipients of it, and we cannot tell you why there is racism. If you want to read more of these comments and watch the live stream, we invite you to it on our Facebook page, NBC Bay Area, or on YouTube, which is also youtube.com/NBC Bay Area. Marcus?
All right, thanks, Chris. Well, a lot of people have a question. So what do you do if you get pulled over by a cop for no reason? I've gotten that talk. So many black men have gotten that talk. There's no question. Talking about race can really be difficult, but Jessica, we all know it's a necessary thing. Joining me now from Oakland, Anthony Edwards. He is a father of two, and he has a son, a 12-year-old son, Donovan, who he has had that talk with. And yours was actually caught on camera. So talk to me about that moment when you had to have that talk, when you realized, okay, now is the time.
You know, when I first started to talk, you don't want to scare him, but at the same time, you want him to understand how serious this is. So I didn't give him the full talk. It was more little parts of it, what not to do, what to do, you know, comply. And if they actually are arrested, don't sign anything, and ask for your mom, your dad, and just comply.
And what you were telling
I didn't want to.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, when we were talking about that, it really isn't, like you said, not to scare your son, but really armor him with what he needs if he should ever be in that situation.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sadly you have to have those type of tools where, you know, his other friends might not have to go through that. But being an African American in this environment, he needs to know that, and he needs to be ready for it. So when it does happen, he's not caught off guard. He doesn't do anything wrong. He does something that he's going to regret, because in the end, we just want him to come home safe. We want our son to come back to his mom, his sister.
No, I know you're a parent, and a lot of parents right now of all races are having to talk to their kids because we're seeing it everywhere. For you, what is the biggest fear you have for your son? He's just 12 years old now, but what is that biggest fear you have?
Not coming home. Not coming home. Because by the grace of God, that could be him being arrested, being thrown to the ground, having that knee on his throat. You know, you never know where it's going to happen. I mean, if you look at the laundry list of black folks that has happened to, it doesn't discriminate as far as location. It can be in San Francisco. It could be in New York. This was in Minnesota. So that's my biggest fear, is that he comes home alive. I want him home.
And how have you and your family dealt with what's going on right now? Because it's everywhere. It not only has the talk that we all have, but it's opened the door for a lot of other conversations that need to be had right now.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, being an African-American family, you have to have that talk. It seems like once a month or twice a month when we actually see these victims. So we were always constantly having to talk. So it's not one of those things where this was awkward for us to talk about. When that woman, and her name escapes you right now, in Central Park, got on the phone and said, this man is attacking me, I immediately brought my daughter, who was 9, and my son in and had them look at this. So for African-American families, like I said, unfortunately, now you look at it, we always have that talk. It's never ending. Eric Garner is another talk. Trayvon Martin is another talk.
And you know, I know we were talking about it, and it really is what I'm holding up right now. I'm holding up my cell phone. And that is the thing that I think that is arming a lot of people right now, because without the cell phone, without that footage, that image in real time, it's somebody's word against another's. And sometimes it doesn't turn out a pretty sight.
Yeah, and I think the unique thing that we have in Minnesota is, we were saying before, we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We have a complete movie. Whereas before, we only had little snippets of what the police did or the person running away. But this was a complete movie. We had everything there. And I think that's what really kind of triggered a lot of folks when they actually see what happened. I think for a long time, some folks sit back and say, well, what did they do? Now we have a video footage of this man didn't do anything wrong.
And so Last question I have for you.
Sure.
How do you encourage yourself?
You know, I think every day with having kids, you challenge yourself to be better and do better, to make the world better for them. I see some changes, but it's not enough. And so for me, I have to make it every day better for my kids. They're young, they're insightful. And, you know, everyone always says, you know, everyone's kids are beautiful. Mine are. So I want to make sure that they make a strong impression in this world. So for me, I just challenge myself every morning to be better and to do better.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the conversation to have with your family. Because
you have to have it, whether you're white, black, whatever color, you have to have that conversation.
And that conversation adds understanding too.
Absolutely. And, you know, sometimes folks feel those conversations are rough, but folks on the other side, you know, they're not going to be upset if you don't know. It's about education. Not everyone has a black friend. You know, you can't go out and just make one on Facebook. But if you just have those conversations, it can happen organically.
All right. Anthony Edwards, you know, I thank you for being open and honest with us tonight and really sharing some insight what it is like for you to be a parent right now. And I think what you said really helps a lot of people right now. I really do.
I hope so. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Anthony.
All right. Thank you.
That was really hard to hear. I mean, that was really hard to hear. To have him have that conversation. I mean, if we could all just listen to that, all of us parents, listen to that with our parental heart.
Right.
Not intellectually, but with our parental heart, there is no way you could turn away from that and not feel pain. That's awful.
That is the conversation that people have to have. And a lot of families are having that conversation now because we're seeing it.
Yeah, I know, but to know that you have to say that to your child.
That is what you have.
That changes.
We don't have
them.
the option as a lot of black people. We don't have that option of just seeing it on TV. It's you know, we are really, especially for black young boys, you have to arm them with the knowledge early, because you don't want them to make the mistake. I remember when I was a kid, I would go into the store and I would walk out, and my mother said, "Why don't you have a bag?" And I kept going, "What do you mean, why don't I have a bag? I bought, like, what do you mean?" She said, "I don't want people to think you stole something.
Wow.
I want you to always put that in a bag, always." And I probably was like 8.
Right, and carry the receipt.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, these are the conversations that we have to have with our kids. It's just, there's just no option. And I'm not saying that everyone doesn't have those conversations, you know, but I'm just telling you what happens in our homes. And it's tough, but it has to be done. And I really want people to understand the weight sometimes, because it's hard.
And to know that everybody loves their children exactly the same. And
exactly.
Every life lost for someone is exactly the same pain.
Right.
If we could just focus on that.
It's always somebody's child.
It is always somebody's child. We did go over, and we apologize for that, but that conversation with Anthony was so powerful. Marcus, your conversation with us tonight was so powerful. I so appreciate your honesty. You have moved me in a deep way.
What I wanted to do with this hour, or hour and 5 minutes now, but I really wanted to open that door. And I know, like Joan was saying, you know, what do I say? I know a lot of people are asking us, well, what do I say to people? If you have someone that you know, that you trust, just ask. It's a one-on-one conversation. You don't have to just say, I just have a question. And I feel that if you're honest and vulnerable, people will answer those questions.
Yeah.
I open that question. If you ever see me out, we can talk. I don't mind talking about this.
That's wonderful. We are going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. It's the words of Maya Angelou, and she says, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." Right?
Absolutely.
We hope so.
Powerful words.
Thank you for being with us.